Hello everybody, John here from the esports department, going over tonight's 4-game LPL LCK slate. This slate has a couple interesting spots on it, some that are important for the standings of their various leagues, some that I think could be kind of interesting DFS spots. I've added a new slight metric for us because I like to keep track of not only how the teams are doing overall this season, but how they're doing more recently. So I've added a this month game stat, just showing how many games they've won versus lost this month. I think that'll give us a decent idea, in the last 3 weeks or so, how are these teams holding up versus how they did the entire season. Now, keep in mind, this is matches when I'm talking about their overall record for the season, whereas the stat is in games. So it's just going to show you, it can also show you, how this team has done as far as in their individual series this month. They might have 3 wins, but maybe they're 6-3 versus, being 6-0 or something of that nature, so you can kind of see how they're doing. It's also kind of an eye-opening stat sometimes that a lot of teams aren't doing, even if you view them as like being very strong, a lot of the times they've still lost a lot of games this month. So the first matchup is Top Esports at -1,000. They are 6-4 on the season, up against Rogue Warriors, who is +550. They are 4-8 on the season. This month, Top Esports is 7-4. Rogue Warriors is 6-9. So Top Esports a little behind the curve on playing so far this month, but they're obviously doing significantly better than Rogue Warriors. Rogue Warriors has made a hell of a resurgence from the beginning of this season. They've moved all the way up to almost 1,700 GPM when I believe they were sitting below 1,600 GPM for some of this season. That's part of the reason I like throwing the this month stat in there, just because this GPM is a combination of Rogue Warriors sub 1,600 GPM and their probably mid 1,700-ish GPM that they've been playing with recently. So it's kind of, I want to get a little bit of a fuller picture. And they haven't been that bad this month. I mean, 6-9 is not the worst as far as, overall record goes for this month. It's not great, obviously, but it's not, among the worst teams in the league. Victory 5, for comparison, is 0-10 this month, where Rogue Warriors is 6-9. So big difference between those two teams, even though, their GPMs aren't super far apart because of the Rogue Warriors early season. That said, in this matchup, it is a complete stat whitewash: 1868 to 1678, +115 to -207, 3956 to 3235, just advantages everywhere, and a 23% dragon advantage for Top Esports. Kill per win, death per loss wise, this matchup plays out pretty well. 20.6 kill per win for Top Esports, 17.4 DPL for Rogue Warriors. Definitely a matchup that has some bloody potential. Even on the other side, 18.3 to 17.8. Pretty high blood potential on the Rogue Warriors side if they were to win. If you wanted to play Rogue Warriors in the largest field GPPs, I wouldn't blame you for that, but it feels like a slate where you could probably do without them. I guess the underdog spots on this slate are pretty wide open to the point where you probably don't need Rogue Warriors. But if you wanted to take a big shot on them, it's not like Top Esports has been infallible this season. They've definitely had some tough matchups. I probably won't find myself on much Rogue Warriors, if any. But if you wanted to take a big shot on them, I wouldn't hate it. We've definitely seen anybody win. And if you're playing a field that's the size of the $15 or whatever, you need outlier results. You might as well go with something like Rogue Warriors, where you're probably getting the lowest ownership on the slate, or at least among it. Top Esports really the team we're looking to target, though. Cash playable for sure. The second matchup, Suning at +115. They're 7-5 on the season, up against FPX at -150. They are 9-3 on the season. This month, however, Suning is 9-4, FPX 7-5. So Suning has actually been better this month in games and losses. Keep in mind, when we're doing this month, that's not taking into account strength of schedule. So it's not an automatic like Suning has been better because they're 9-4 this month, and FPX has been worse because they're 7-5. FPX has also had a lot of roster switching things that they had to mess around with, but they're back to the main roster now. As far as comparing stats, 1924, FPX among the best in the world, maybe the best in the world. They're right up there at 1924. I think EDG is the only other team that's kind of comparable GPM wise to 1798, +171 to +59. The first blood is on Suning's side, 48 to 38, but first turret, big advantage for FPX, 30% advantage in first turret. They also have a 14% edge in dragons. Kill per win, death per loss wise, FPX is always super bloody, 18.7, 19.4, very large numbers. Suning is usually not on the bloodier side, but FPX is one of those like big three teams in the Big Four, I guess, teams in the LPL that I really think generally dictate pace to the point where their matches are usually going to be bloody regardless. It's them, WE, JDG, and Top Esports. Those four teams tend to always dictate pace to the. You don't see a lot of like 12-3 wins from those four teams. They almost always get bloody in their matchups regardless. So this seems like a good matchup to be involved on either side of. If Suning comes out and picks up the win here, I would expect a lot of points from them. Suning is one of my least favorite teams. A lot of people know that, but I do think they have one of the best combinations on this slate of ownership versus chance to win versus upside. I think their upside is huge when they do win. I think they win reasonably often, and I don't think their ownership is going to be that high. I think I have them at something like fourth highest ownership. And that's not bad in this spot. They're probably the premier underdog that people will go towards. But if you get a 4-stack of Suning in there, if they win, a 4-stack feels like it'll be optimal for them. And the scoring on a 4-stack should be very, very high. FPX, on the other hand, I think they do win this match more than 50% of the time, for sure. Probably, I think the minus 150 number is a pretty good number for FPX. I think that's about where they should be for this matchup. And I expect them to be pretty bloody in their wins as well. So this feels like the high target matchup on the slate. This is the one where I'm going to have the most 4-stacks. Probably a lot of 4-stacks of Suning, a lot of 4-stacks of FPX. Mix these other teams in as needed. This is my target matchup for the day. Moving over to the LCK, we have HLE at minus 155. They're 4-7 on the season, up against KT, who is plus 120, 4-8 on the season. So pretty similar records, 4-7, 4-8. This month, HLE is 7-6, KT is 5-7. So slightly opposite trajectories from this team. Sorry guys, slight dog issue there. HLE was one of the worst teams in the world coming into like the early portion of this season. Their stats were like in that 1600-ish range. I think they were even sub 1600 for a minute. They were like one of the worst teams in the world, and then have rocketed back into being in some level of contention. KT on the other hand started out the season pretty strong actually, and then has kind of faded back, 5-7 in their last 12. Overall, with the statistics, it's pretty close. 1744, 1751, minus 67 to minus 42. Advantages for KT in First Blood and First Turret, but just barely a 6% Dragon Edge, and the Herald percentage is HLE by 5%. At 15 minutes, the teams are super close, minus 82 to plus 9. So most of the stats favor KT. I do think the lines are fairly reasonable at minus 155 to plus 120. HLE does feel like the favorite. More recently, HLE has been the better team. Even in this month's stats, you can see 7-6 to 5-7 for KT. This also has the higher potential of the LCK matches as far as scoring, I think. 18.5 and 17.3 for HLE make them basically an LPL team. KT with 17.7 and 16.2. You don't like to see the 16.2, but still this feels like a matchup that could put some scores out there. You're probably getting a pretty good combination of upside and ownership with both of these teams. I do think the line is fairly fair. I think HLE is a reasonably sized favorite against KT here. But if you wanted to play KT, I think they make a lot of sense too. Small underdog, upside if they win. Both matchups feel like a pretty good. Both sides of the matchup feel like a pretty good spot. I would feel comfortable playing HLE in cash. I think they're enough better recently that they're cash playable for me. Maybe even safer for me than FPX. I think I'd rather, if I was just going on pure safety, I think I would rather play HLE. So we'll see when we get to the cash lineups if that's where we end up looking to go. The last LCK matchup, Freda Brion at plus 210. They're 5-7 on the season. Up against Nongshim Red Force, minus 285, 9-3 on the season. This month, Brion is 6-7. Nongshim is 11-4. Nongshim is like the most interesting team in the world because their stats are not insane, but they're as far as record, they're one of the best teams in the world, and their stats are just not that great. A lot of that is because Nongshim really has been embracing the late game carries. You see a lot of Rise, you see a lot of Aphelios when you look back in their match history, and they're willing to mix it up. They have some games. There's a Jace or two in there. There's no Olaf. They're willing to play those champions to some degree, but they've really embraced the late game carrying of an Aphelios and a Rise. And Gory has been fantastic for them. They're just a very interesting team because you don't usually see a team with these stats that's just consistently winning, especially like the minus 641 goal differential at 15. It's really rare you're going to see a team that's 9-3 and 11-4 in games this year, and they're minus 641 at 15 minutes. They've really embraced it, and I still don't really believe in them when it comes to being like the LCK champion for 2021 summer. I just don't think they're going to win or really have much of a shot of winning. I'm not sure that they have the next, like, sort of the next gear for the playoffs, but we'll see, man, because people have been doubting them all year, and they've just been coming through and coming through and coming through. So, GPM wise, it's 1789 to 1748, a win for Nongshim, plus 53 to minus 15. Both advantages in First Blood and First Turret go to Brion, actually, 54-51 to 42-38. Dragons are also to Brion by 11%, but Nongshim has the Herald advantage 7%. And at 15 minutes, it's actually Fred Brion who's better, minus 108 to minus 641. So, like I said, I mean, Nongshim has some of the trademarks I usually don't like to see from a team. I don't like to see a team that has a better Herald percentage than their opponent, but is worse off at 15 minutes. There's just things I don't like, but Nongshim has been making it work with these Aphelios/Rise type compositions. So I do think Nongshim deserves to be a reasonable favorite. Minus 285 feels too heavy to me. I think they're, for me, more like minus 250 or minus 225. Might even go a little bit lower than that. If I was just, off the top of my head capping. Somewhere in the minus 200 to minus 250 range. But I do think they're the favorite. If you wanted to put a bet in on Brion at plus 210, that feels actually pretty reasonable to me. That said, when it comes to DFS, this is the least interesting matchup by a lot. Brion is just generally super low interest, and then Nongshim, even at 16-7, 16-7, is just not high enough on a slate like this for me to be that interested. If you wanted to play a Nongshim player or two in a lineup, I guess I wouldn't hate it. You're getting some safety. We'll see how they look for cash, because I think they're safe enough for cash. But I'm not insanely excited about Nongshim Red Force on this slate. That said, it looks like projection-wise, they're showing up all right at least. Third place with Deokdam, and then they do drop down a fair bit before you get to Peanut, and drop down even more before Gory. But, reasonable numbers there. It's not like they're, off the screen in all these numbers. So you can definitely play some Nongshim, it looks like. For ownership, I think you're going to see Top Esports in first. They're a huge favorite and very bloody. FPX and Suning, I think, will both get a decent amount of ownership. My interest is between Nongshim Red Force and HLE is, I think, one of the most interesting things on the slate. I think one of those teams is definitely going to be significantly higher owned than the other, but I'm not sure which one it is. Whether people will prefer to go for Nongshim or HLE. I think overall HLE is cheaper, but Gory is like crazy cheap in the mid lane. He's like 6,800. Whereas in the other lanes, HLE is, or like Peanut and is way more expensive than Johan. Gory is way cheaper than Chovy, but then Deft is cheaper than Deokdam. So it kind of depends on how your lineup is set up on which one of, like, where you need to save the salary. But like Kellen, much more expensive than Vista. It's lane by lane on where you need to save your salary here. Morgan at 6,000 with Rich at 62 is the closest of the group. So some people might go with Nongshim to save some money, like in the mid lane. Other people might go HLE to save some money at 80 carry. It really just depends on what people are going for. But one of these teams I think will be significantly higher owned than the other, and whichever one is lower I think is going to be pretty good value. Suning makes sense as the highest owned underdog in a pretty likely bloody matchup. Been playing very well this month. They should have a lot of people looking towards them. And then I think you got KT, Rogue Warriors, and I actually think Brion will be lower owned than Rogue Warriors. I feel like there's enough people out there who both like Rogue Warriors and know that playing against Top Esports is generally a good thing. As far as if your team wins, the upside is going to be there. I think there's enough people that recognize that probably Brion slips below Rogue Warriors even in ownership. Maybe I'm wrong there and Rogue Warriors ends up the lowest owned team, but something makes me feel like Brion is going to be down there. If we look at just the favorites for a minute. Oh, there's an error. I need to get them to fix ZDZ. Okay, in the top lane, it's Nuguri and Morgan, so FPX and HLE. In the jungle, it's HLE and FPX. In the mid lane, FPX and Top, with HLE in third. At AD carry, Top Esports and HLE, with FPX in third. and its support top esports and HLE with FPX in third. So it's always HLE, FPX, always the top scorer, except at the AD carry position. Generally speaking, though, HLE and FPX feel like the two teams that are sticking out as the higher scoring teams on this slate. Nongshim, the clear last place. So if you're looking for a favorite to pair your underdog with, Nongshim is probably the last place you go. With the other three, you can mix in the other three teams before you bother with Nongshim. As far as possible cash lineups go, Top Esports feels like probably wants to be in our lineup regardless, but I'm willing to be open to the idea if they're not. FPX and Sunning, I feel like you could play FPX as long as you think they're going to win like at least 60-something% of the time. It feels like a pretty decent spot. HLE and Nongshim I think are both playable. I'd prefer not to be on FPX, but the pricing may force us that way. I mean, let's see, TN 7000, Doinby's only 74, which is not bad. LWX is only 74. We'll see if we're kind of forced that way by the pricing. Let's start with Top Esports FPX. Then we'll do Top Esports HLE, Top Esports Nongshim, HLE FPX, HLE Nongshim, and then Nongshim FPX. Start with Top Esports and FPX. It's a top lane captain. It's a 3-3 where I would definitely prefer to be on 4 top if I could help it. Doesn't look like that's something that's likely to happen here. Top Esports' pricing is pretty prohibitive. Save 1,000 by going to Crisp. Let's see. Switch Yanja to Crisp. Switch Doinby to Knight. And Tion to Karsa. That gets you the 4 Top Esports version. Does that switch the captains as well? It does. So the projection's not great, but honestly I'd prefer this version if I was going to play this combo. That way we can get the 4 Top Esports. I think it's important to make sure that you're getting 4 of the safer side if you're going to play the risky team. So we'll do 567.5. Not an impressive upside on that one. How does Top Esports and HLE look? Jungle Captain, we are getting the HLE lineup, so Johan is at least, we'll find out for sure about Johan before match starts. I don't really want to play the 3-3 though. Just keeps throwing the 3-3 at us. But if we want to get Jungle Captain, it looks like that's kind of what we're stuck with. So 588.1, it just tells us we're probably not playing Top Esports FPX almost for sure, because this is a safer lineup with a much higher projection. So almost certainly not messing with Top Esports FPX. Top Esports and Nongshim. $564, and it's a worse captain. Don't even need to consider that one. Top Esports HLE looking pretty solid for right now. Let's look at HLE and FPX. Doinby captain. It's our highest projection so far. It wants the 3-3. If I was going to play this version, we're already missing out on top, so we're kind of playing a little bit of a sneak for ceiling type setup here, but I would probably switch to a 4th. Probably switch to Tion and go ahead and go with this, which is 589.6. And then we get Nongshim and FPX. And that's a 575, so not even really worth considering. If you're going to play the riskier version, you can just play the HLE FPX version. Wait, HLE Nongshim. Did I do that? I think I put that in the wrong number. HLE Nongshim is 583.4. the 593.6 was HLE FPX, right? Yeah. Okay, so 3 kind of grouped close cash lineups. Top Esports HLE by far the safest. It feels like there's really no issue with just going with that. It projects higher than the HLE Nongshim. It's only 5 points below HLE FPX. I have to remember how I made this version now. We had to switch. Oh no, this is the right one. 588.1. So, I think you either go with this one or you go with that HLE FPX version that we were looking at with Doinby Captain. The Top Esports HLE is definitely the safest and has pretty decent upside, so I'd probably just go here, just looking to see if there's any possible way to improve this lineup, because I hate the 3-3. I really do. But King Tian and Morgan aren't exactly the top laners that I'm like super excited to go towards. But this feels like the best combination of safety and upside. So for cash, I think I go with this. If you want to take a little bit more of a risk and go HLE FPX, I don't have any problem with that necessarily, but just recognize that you are taking a little bit of an extra risk there. One way that you can like make these decisions, and this is I say this a lot, and I think some people don't necessarily understand why I'm giving you like options of like whether you want to be risky. Like if you play this HLE FPX cash lineup and you're in pretty heavy, then you can pop over and play like say Sunning in GPPs today and just play some 4 stacks of Sunning and try to balance yourself out that way. If you're just playing cash, I think I would rather go with something like this. I think it's a little bit more solid. But if you want to balance with GPP or balance with 3-mans or 4-mans or something, then the HLE FPX cash lineup gives you like an aggressive ceiling for cash and then an easy way to hedge in your GPPs by playing like I say, some Forest Sunning lineups or getting some KT lineups in there. So that's what I'm saying about that, is like it's up to you depending on what your setup is going to be as far as which side of this would most fit your setup correctly. As far as GPP lineups, probably not a lot of Brion for me, probably not a lot of Rogue Warriors. I'll find myself on some KT and Sunning, mixed in mostly with FPX, Top Esports, HLE. Maybe just a hint of Nongshim in the smaller fields, where I could go like a Nongshim FPX or a Nongshim Top Esports or something like that and still get a pretty decent lineup in there. But mostly, probably going to find me on KT and Sunning tonight. With these big LPL boys, FPX, Top Esports, and probably a hint of HLE in there as well. So that's what we're looking at for tonight, guys. Appreciate everybody. If you have any more questions, just hit me up on Twitter or in the Discord, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.